I would like to welcome to the podium Susan T. Marx, whose vision of the centrality of the artists and their work and their art to our sense of humanity and well-being has helped pave the way for today's program. Welcome, Susan.
Thank you. Good afternoon and welcome to the 6th Annual Distinguished Lecture Series at the Arthur Ross Gallery. And how fitting this year, we're collaborating with Perry Worldhouse, Penn's home for global engagement. Despite the darkness in our troubled world and the effects of the pandemic, we're seeing light at the end of the tunnel. Certainly a bright spot is the fact that Shirin Neshat, a world-renowned Iranian-born artist and award-winning filmmaker, is this year's speaker. A very, very warm welcome. We will hear more about her in the introduction shortly. I'm thrilled that this year we are once again able to gather in person as well as on Zoom. I understand we have a turnout of 425 people, so that's very exciting. A word about the origins of the lecture series. Many years ago, back in the 20th century, as an undergraduate at Penn, majoring in political science and international relations, I was able to take several history of art courses. For me, it was a magical experience and opened my eyes to a new world around me. Since that time, art has had a profound impact on my life, both art appreciation as well as creating art, which I do as a serious amateur stone carver. So in giving back to the university, I wanted to spark a spark in today's 21st century students, hoping to inspire them across a variety of disciplines to develop an interest in and a passion for art. When we initiated this series, we'd hoped to attract a wide audience locally, regionally, and nationally for the wonderful Arthur Ross Gallery. We've done it internationally as well. Based on today's turnout, I think we have succeeded. And now it is my great pleasure to introduce Lynn Marsden-Atlas, Executive Director of the Arthur Ross Gallery, who will introduce our speaker, Shirin Neshat.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Susan T. Marx Distinguished Lecture. Thank you, Susan. And the Global Lens Cultural Program featuring a talk by our wonderful, renowned Shirin Neshat. The Penn Art Collection includes 3 works by Neshat. Ava, Masses from 2012 is an ink on silver gelatin photograph from her series, The Book of Kings, which is on view actually upstairs, and a generous gift of Richard and Lisa Perry. My great thanks to Michael Horowitz, LaShawn Jefferson, and the Perry Worldhouse staff for co-sponsoring and hosting this very special event. I invite you to visit the Arthur Ross Gallery, since we're not having our talk there, and our current exhibition, No Ocean Between Us, Art of Asian Diasporas in Latin America and the Caribbean, 1945 to the present. And my heartfelt thanks to Susan, her husband, Philip Kivitz, and her family who are with us today, either in person or online. I first discovered Shirin Neshat's work, Rapture, 1999, at the Whitney Biennial. And over 20 years later, it's an honor to introduce her. Shirin Neshat is an Iranian-born artist and filmmaker living in New York. She works and continues to experiment with the mediums of photography, video, and film, which she imbues with highly poetic and politically charged images and narratives that question issues of power, religion, race, gender, and the relationship between the past and present, Occident and Orient, individual and collective through the lens of her personal experiences as an Iranian woman living in exile. Shirin Neshat has held numerous solo exhibitions at museums internationally, including the Pinakothek der Moderne in Munich, the Modern Art Museum of Fort Worth, the Broad in Los Angeles, Museo Correr in Venice, Italy, the Hirshhorn Museum, and the Detroit Institute of Arts. Neshat has directed 3 feature-length films, Women Without Men, which received the Silver Lion Award for Best Director at the 66th Venice International Film Festival, Looking for Kotham, and most recently Land of Dreams, which premiered at the Venice International Film Festival in 2021. She was awarded the Golden Lion Award, the first international prize at the 48th Biennale di Venezia, and the Premio Imperiale Award for painting. Please join me in welcoming Shirin Neshat.
Thank you all. I have to say this is also my first truly public appearance since COVID time. And what a beautiful day to be here in Philadelphia. I've never been to Philadelphia, and this is amazing. So thank you for being here. I wanted to really start by thanking Lynn Marsden for her persistency to bring me. We've been talking for years, and it's finally happened. I want to thank Richard and Lisa Perry for being so kind at the wonderful Perry House, and LaShawn Jefferson and Michael Harvitz. Today, I'm going to give you a kind of take you on a visual journey. And the challenge is they've given me 25 minutes to summarize my entire career. And I'm already out of breath how to can do that. So the format is that I give you a very quick overview, and then we'll watch a short clip of a video, and eventually we have a Q&A. But I just start by an image, if you could give me my pictures. And then before I really go through my images, I would like to make a few very general remarks that I think might help you sort of navigate understanding of my work. Don't want my name, I want my pictures. Can you, okay, it's not advancing. Maybe you can do it. Anyway, the most important issue is, maybe you can advance it for me. Yeah, there we go. That's me. It's very important to begin by explaining how untraditional my practice is, my career has been, and that there can't even be a conversation about my work without speaking about the nomadic behavior of my work, coming from still photography to video, to directing movies, and now I'm directing my first opera. And this is something that as we go through the work, you understand the shifts. But at the same time, while the work has changed quite a lot in terms of medium, I want to point out at certain things that never seem to change. And I think this is really important, regardless of whether it's a photograph or a video or a movie. My work has always been deeply personal, but never autobiographical. I've never been interested in telling my story, but all the characters, all the stories are stemmed from my experience as an Iranian living in America. And this is something really to point out about my identity. One of the biggest realizations that I had recently, that I'm standing here speaking to you as an Iranian artist, but I'm also an American artist. And what I create, ironically, is not entirely Iranian or American. It is a product of a life of a person who's been a life of hybridity, a nomadic life of an immigrant. So someone like me, whose life has been filled with duality, will never be able to address any culture with any absolute sense of certainty. So the idea of authenticity, purity, the idea of belonging, home, truth, all of those are irrelevant to someone like myself. So if I can go into detail, I could say with certainty that emotionally, I am very Iranian. My emotional foundation, I'm very much moved by the same music and the same literature that all Iranians pay attention to. I still have people, my family live in Iran. I have a huge community of Iranian people outside. I follow very much what happens in Iran. Yet, I have lived longer in this country than in my own country. I was here since 17 years old. I live in exile. I am educated in the West. And it is something that my maturity as a person, as an artist, came from New York, from the underground scene in New York. And so, in fact, if you disconnect me today from United States and take me back to Iran, it's very possible that I couldn't sustain the sense of freedom, independence that I've gained. It's completely Western and non-Iranian. And so this sense of duality that I'm speaking about as this person who's constantly navigating and conflicted between East and West, Iran and America, it's also something that has informed my work. And I would like you to pay attention to it as I move through the images, both in terms of forms and concepts. In terms of forms, my work are very personal, but extremely social political. They're not about me. The ideas stem from my experience, but they're completely existential issues that are about our humanity. I'm not able to make a work that is only about me or the world. My work are very dark, very violent and disturbing, but they're also very beautiful. The calligraphy, the constructions of the images. The opposites are what constitutes my work: men, woman, nature, culture, fragility versus strength, the emotional versus the rationale. And visually speaking, in terms of form, my work has been always black and white, magic realism, surrealism, dreams. It's always this negotiation between what is real and what is not real. Now, there are other issues that are extremely consistent about my work, regardless of the change in the work in terms of content or form. Political. My work is political maybe because I am a child of a revolution. I am separated from my family and loved ones ever since the Islamic Revolution. The revolution has sort of defined my life. I have an unresolved relationship to my country because of a series of political events that define my destiny and my family. History, I'm trying to go rather fast. Even though I would say that my work is very poetic, very lyrical, it's very mystical, it's deeply historical. And I have no idea where this came from. But my work, no matter what series you look at, it's narrating history. If you think about the Woman of Allah, which I'll get into, it's about the Islamic Revolution of 1979. Later, I made Woman Without Men. It was about the 1953 coup. I've made Land of Dreams, that is about America today. So history seems to be something that it's inseparable from my storytelling. Literature. Being born in Iran, obviously, as many of you know, we're people of poetry. We are people of ancient mystics, modern and contemporary poets. Every Iranian is grown up with reading poetry. My work has either had poetry inscribed as calligraphy, or I've had novels which I have readapted into screenplays, into filmmaking. So I have a relationship with literature, but also I believe that my style of storytelling and images are all extremely poetic, evocative from this history of literature from Iran. Now, let me begin with my still photography. Again, I'm being conscious of time and someone is supposed to wave at me at a certain time. Still photography. For me, photographs has been always about human portraiture. I'm obsessed with the power of human expression, which is endlessly interesting, no matter how many millions of times human body is captured. My photographs are always very stylized, very sculptural, never with a background. And the evolution of my photography has been that it began as self-portraits, then led to me taking pictures of other people and friends, eventually finding people who became me, like muses. And finally today, I only photograph strangers, and I will get to that. Woman of Allah is the first body of work of mine. It is started in 1993 to 1997. If I had to summarize what the Women of Allah were about, was my personal obsession, a nostalgic point of view, looking at Iran in post-revolution from the perspective of an Iranian who had been living outside and was not present during the revolution. The Women of Allah basically tried to comprehend the religious fervor, the revolution, the kind of philosophical, ideological basis for a revolution that transformed the Iranian society from what it was during the Shah period as Persia to the Islamic Republic of Iran. But the main premise was to look at it from the perspective of women who were voluntarily militant and participated in the process of the revolution. And there were many. I researched quite a lot of many women. And so the images basically combined the female body, which was extremely problematic and for its sensuality and eroticism. And that's why we wear the veil. The text, which became poetry by majority Iranian women poets who had a strong conviction with the revolutionary fervor. The veil, which was obviously very controversial for some people, is a solidarity with the revolution and the Islamization of the country. With some people, it's a symbol of repression. And obviously the weapon, which symbolized violence. So I was very interested in the kind of state of mind of any martyr, subject of martyrdom, that would stand in that intersection of love of God, faith, devotion, yet cruelty, violence, and ultimately death. So talking about the sense of duality, talking about contradiction, opposite, paradoxical. For me, there was an extreme paradox in terms of those who voluntarily committed violence in their love for God, and in result, consequently, their sacrifice, material life, their children, etc. Many people went on to be very critical of this series because, including the government of Iran, which then made me go into exile, as well as the people who were critical of the Islamic Revolution, who felt that in some ways I was endorsing them. Can I get a little water? I forgot to tell you I had COVID a week ago, but I'm COVID-free.
Oh, great.
Don't worry, I'm not infectious. So a lot of people from the people who were against the government were very critical of me, thinking that this work are basically endorsing the Islamic Republic of Iran. Anyway, without going too far into it, I will go to the next series of work, the Book of Kings, talking about history. This body of work basically sort of captures another pivotal moment of Iranian history, 2009. 30 years after the Islamic Revolution, we had the most significant political turmoil, which was, some of you may remember, in 2009, there was an outpour of young Iranian men and women on the street. This time, it was not a religious fervor, but it was a democratic fervor. It was men and women who were asking for some idea of democracy and this idea of sacrifice, patriotism, which existed in the Women of Allah, this time came back in a completely different form. The young people were not religious, and they were extremely courageous and put their lives at risk. So this body of work basically, in my mind, it became sort of a tribute to that notion of activism, patriotism that we saw in Iran for the first time in a long time. The Book of Kings is a book by the fantastic mystic Ferdowsi from the 10th century. I used this ancient book as a reference. The Book of Kings, it's during the Arab conquest, when the Iranians were fighting to protect their nation. There too, there were these epic long poems of heroes and patriots who were beheaded and killed because of their love for their nation. So again, this intersection between love of nation, yet brutality and violence. Many of these young people eventually were arrested, tortured, and killed. And even myself, for the first time in my life, I became an activist. We were all green. I organized hunger strike, etc. So it was one of the most inspirational movements in the Iranian history. And for me, this body of work, which was very extensive and opposite to Women of Allah, it became like an installation. I'm having a hard time, yeah. So it became more narrative than the previous work. As you could see, there were this relationship between many, many images of people who, I would say, masses, the people that are bystanders. And these were the patriots with the hands over the heart, and these were the villains. Again, because of the shortness of time, I just move forward. Our house is on fire. Something significant happened. With the previous series of the Book of Kings, I learned that even with photography, I was becoming a storyteller, that I was no longer interested in self-portraits where you tell everything in a single image, but a collection of images. I went to Egypt during the Egyptian Revolution in 2011. It was an invitation by the Rauschenberg Foundation. And there, for the very first time ever in my career, I began to speak with average citizens in Cairo, Egyptians, who were somehow deeply affected by the revolution. If the Book of Kings was mainly about the youth, Our House is on Fire, which, by the way, the Arab Spring Green Movement, we all consider part of the same contagious movements. They were not that separable. And these were the elderly who paid a great price by loss of their children in Tahrir Square, etc. So I, for the first time, found myself in the position of a documentary artist, where I went and seeked out people, real people, and I interviewed them, I talked to them. Of course, I also paid them some to compensate. And eventually, this group of photographs called Our House is on Fire became a portrait of Egypt during the Egyptian Revolution from my perspective. Of course, I shared with them my story as someone who a revolution had separated me from the family, etc. So there was an incredible bonding. The writing on their faces are almost microscopic, but they are a combination of what they said and poetry of Egyptian poets that were then translated into, and I'm not sure if you can see, but they were extremely microscopic. This basically opened up the door to me as this whole horizon of me no longer interested in finding models, friends, people who look interesting, but really going after average citizens of the world and be able to create groups of photographs that in a way became a portrait of that culture. This is called The Home of My Eyes. It's from Azerbaijan. Again, it was an invitation by a small institution in Baku to make a group of work. I went, and if you know, Azerbaijan is a country where my mother comes from. It's a place that multi-ethnicity live together. Caucasians, people from Russia, from Armenia, from Turkey, from Persia. People are Christian, Muslim. There are many multiple languages people are speaking. So my idea of the home of my eyes, someone who's kind of homeless, to focus on the idea of home, but what it means to these people who are all coming from totally different ethnicity. In some cases, Armenia and Azerbaijan are at war with each other. So I talked to them. I talked to them about their background. I collected their stories about what home means to them. The only thing that was in common with these images, I asked them to hold their hands similar to iconic Christian paintings. And so what you have in common, like El Greco's paintings. So what became the only thing that was common is their gesture is in their hands, which is in the praying position. So anyway, this group became a massive body of work. Eventually it was shown in Venice, in Museo Correr, and oddly enough, the museum really apologized because there was a Madonna that they couldn't move from the room, and everybody thought that I cleverly brought the Madonna and installed it right next to it. But there was something incredibly powerful about these images of people, Middle Eastern, Caucasian, all of these people from different ethnicities having this common posture of praying position. Anyway, this was an important project for me to get out into the world. Moving into the video, forget my notes. I wanted to tell you that after making already, Julia, 20 minutes? Oh, gee, this is really impossible. Okay, I go really fast. Videos, okay, I won't even describe them. The moved video is to stay away from judgment of people who looked at my work and were not able to look at the artistic merits of the work, but the political meaning. So the move to video was to free myself from those kind of judgment, to make works that were evocative, lyrical, timeless. They had, I mean, I'm having a hard time with and that there was a choreography, there was landscape, there were quite, this is rapture that Lynn was talking about, and that my obsession became about dreams and surrealism and things that didn't make sense, even if they had a footing in reality. Here was the question of male and female. So all of these videos, which unfortunately I cannot go into detail, black and white, but they were all this very allegorical, quite sort of lyrical videos, 10 minutes long, that were some ways about telling a story. Eventually, my videos became more cinematic as I entered the world of cinema. This is Roja in 2016, where it was actually my own dream that I turned into a video. My obsession with dream has continued over the years. And because I believe dreams are very important, that dreams are common human experience. We all dream. And when we dream, our dreams have a footing in reality, places that we've been, people that you know, but nothing makes sense. Dreams are innocent. And dreams are, to me, a projection of our fears and anxieties. So at first, I began by finding muses and filming my own dreams. And these are some of them which I cannot, unfortunately, get into. To then, I did a trilogy called Dreamers. These are pretty much 10-minute short videos, but they become cinematic because they have a protagonist, they have a beginning, middle, and the end, but still very similar to my earlier videos. And my final project that I don't have any time to work with is my latest work in New Mexico, where I went and photographed 200 people, and I wanted to create a portrait of America. I want to make a room that essentially creates this tapestry of American identity, the diversity of the people that created this country. That is what I know about this country. In New Mexico, I shot a great deal of Native Americans, African Americans, Hispanic immigrants. So it became a collection of 110 photographs of people who were functional, dysfunctional, poor, middle class, men, women, from multiple different ethnicity, and they were all looking at you. And this is the main character of the video that eventually played myself. But you can see that I spent weeks and weeks in New Mexico. I recruited people. I talked to them about who they are and what are their latest dreams. Land of Dreams obviously is a reference to what we think about America. It's a place that dreams come true, which is not necessarily always true. And if I can't say what I want in my country, Iran, I can say what I want in my country, in America. That it was for the first time in my life, I felt it was important to make a work in the United States. That is a critique about a country that I love, I worship, but I feel that it's shifting all in the wrong direction. And so my lens basically had now sharply turned away from Middle East, Iran, Azerbaijan, Morocco, Egypt, but looking into America. And by looking at other minority groups, I began to feel truly my role as an American and my place. The video is very expansive. New Mexico, aside from its demographic, is a fantastic landscape that resembles Iran. So the video, which will show you 2 minutes, it's a double channel projection that is partially taking place in the US and partially in a dubious Iranian colony. And this woman, photographer from Iran, who is really me, is going door to door, asking to take people's photographs and collect their dreams. So now, if I was making videos about my dreams, now I was collecting people's dreams. And just very quickly, because hopefully one day you will, this thing is not advancing very fast. This is a couple of glimpses into the Iranian colony. It's really absurd comedy of all these Iranian men and women dressed in lab coats, busy collecting American people's dreams, their enemies, and analyzing them. So we took this power plant and basically transformed it into this kind of Kafkaesque bureaucracy of the Iranian regime. And so this is a very involved project. It would take me a very long time to explain. But the last thing I want to leave you with before we actually watch the short video is that for the first time, I also make movies, and don't ask me why, it's because you can't buy movies. You can just pay $10 to go see it. It's kind of nice. It takes 6 years. I never make any money. I only lose money. But you know what? It stays for a long time. Land of Dreams ended up being a photographic installation, video, and a feature-length film. It will have its North American premiere at Tribeca Film Festival. It was also in Venice. It was with Matt Dillon and Isabella Rossellini, many stars. But basically, the story of Land of Dreams is the same as the video, but completely narrative, shot very different time, in color, and scripted. How far did I go past my 25 minutes? Oh my God. So I really went fast. I just want to say I will go sit down. No, I'm not going to go to that. We can stop the slide. Thank you. I will come back for the Q&A.
Thank you. So you're in the army.
Yeah, I was there.
For how long?
Too long, way more than I care to remember.
It's really amazing photographs.
Yes, I was there for that one.
Actually, do you mind if I just ask you one more favor?
I guess so.
Would you tell me your last dream?
My last dream. You know, it's always the same dream. Same place, same time. No, it isn't a dream. It's a nightmare. There's this whitish blue light that shoots across the sky, you see. Black smoke rises to form a cloud that covers the sun. I can now look at the sun directly with naked eyes from behind the black smoke. I hear people screaming. The sun is gonna fall. The sun is gonna fall. A strong wind sweeps across the land. The air is full of dust and flying objects. And then there's silence. Dead silence. The sun has died behind the deep black cloud as it starts to rain. Black rain. Raindrops of oil and
We'll begin to take questions from the audience. And there's a speaker there if you'd like to line up. Thank you, Shirin, for a wonderful talk.
Hi, thank you so much. Thank you so much for your work. I was wondering what the significance of black and white is for you. It's very important to me, and I don't know why, but I think that it's, yeah, what does the black and white mean to you?
Well, there is, first of all, there's a starkness about black and white. I find color very seductive and very pretty. And I think that there's something also that I like about unbelievability. There's something about black and white that fits better the idea of surrealism or magic realism, because once something is devoid of color, it leaves reality in many ways. And then you're faced with, like, I can be more severe with the concept that I'm after. I can get rid of all the prettiness of the color, and I can just be more focused on what I really want. I think that's what it is, where I find sometime in the movie business, I'm kind of forced into using color, because they say people don't go see films that are black and white and have subtitles. Well, that's what usually I do. So but I think so it's a kind of an entertainment kind of value that goes with that people appreciate the kind of the pleasantry of color, you know. But I think the severity of my subjects, the darkness, the violence, the disturbing part of it, the melancholy works much more with black and white, where with the color it doesn't work.
Shirin, I have a question from the online audience. What is your favorite camera to use? Can you explain the process behind adding the text to the picture?
Favorite what?
What kind of favorite camera do you use? And can you explain the process behind adding the text to the pictures, the photographs?
They're going to be so disappointed that I don't even own a camera. No, you see, ever since I began, I work with other people. I'm the director of the artwork. With the Woman of Allah, I was subject. Someone photographed me, and I've never felt compelled to learn the technique. I just bring the best people to work with me. But once I take the pictures, which I compose very carefully, I mood book everything. Nothing is spontaneous with my work, including the photographs. They're heavily mood booked, and everything is planned. And then after I take the film from them or the digital, whatever, I take it from there. But I've never felt like I work with great cinematographers. I work with great composers. I work with great scriptwriters. I don't need to have mastered all of their work. I didn't study photography. I didn't study video. I didn't study cinema. So I find that my job is to be a director, but bring the best of people. And what was the question about calligraphy?
Can you explain the process behind adding the text to the
Using my
photographs?
hands very carefully. There is something very interesting about making just massive films and videos, 200 people, whatever, and then coming back to my studio and doing this very intricate calligraphy. I have to say I'm not the best. I've gotten better over the years. I'm not by any means. And I have people who help me, but the people who help me only do the pen. I only am the one who does the brushwork. But there's something like when I do my makeup, it's like there's something I enjoy about using my hands. And the idea of what I can give to the surface of the photograph is like a painting, and they're all original. They are not Photoshop. And I feel, especially lately with the Land of Dreams, my American subjects, they have the interpretation of their dreams comes from an ancient Iranian book that I write in Farsi. So this placement of the Farsi text on those Western subjects, to me, is where we meet. It's where I and them meet together. They give me their faces, their gaze, and I give them something of my culture. And if that makes sense. But it's always that the text is always directly related to the theme of the work. It's either poetry or what people said or whatever.
Thank you. Can you go to the mic, please?
My heart is still pounding from rushing this.
Hi, you have been able to make your work outside of Iran. And right now I'm really curious about what is the state of contemporary art in Iran today. Obviously,
is that possible? You can take your mask just so I can understand clearly.
Okay.
Sorry.
You have been able to make your art outside of Iran and doing it freely and expressing yourself the way that you would want to. I'm curious as to what is the state of contemporary art in Iran today. I'm sure there are artists there. Are they able to make their work, or is there a kind of secession in just what's happening in the art world there?
It's a very good question. We pay different prices. as an Iranian artist, that I make work that could be controversial, I'm forced to live in exile. I can't go back because I have trouble. So that's a decision I make as a person who does not want to be forced to censorship. And so I chose this life. And even though I don't consider myself a political artist, nevertheless, in Iran, it's very difficult. It's very difficult. Everything you make has to go to the Department of Ministry of, and they would have to be completely checked before placed in public. Many films are never released. Many artists are never shown publicly. But you know, it's very interesting because I can't even go about, I mean, this would be a very big conversation. For example, the work I make, it's not a local work. It's not about Iran anymore. And they could make a work about Iran. You see what I'm saying? So someone like me, or many, many other Iranian artists who are living outside, are dealing with different realities and different challenges. You know, we are in an international scene, a very extremely competitive scene, male-dominated scene, and we are working as this non-Western or at sometimes artist, and so we're dealing with very different parameters, right? They're dealing with the local situation and dealing with their own parameters in the government and the censorship, and so, but having said that, despite all of these limitations and boundaries, Iran is thriving. One of the most exciting places for literature, for theater, for visual arts, for cinema, music, and it's just unprecedented. How is that possible? The more you are against the wall, the more creative somehow it seems like. I hope this happens in America, that, you know, now that we have seen such dark period, that artists would be a little bit more sort of serious about looking at issues that is outside of their studio. And so it's a difficult situation, but at the same time, it's a thriving situation.
So you would say that the suppression has basically generated even more creativity and more
Yes.
resistance. So there's more art.
Yes, I would stop before saying it's a good thing. You know, of course, anytime you have, during the Nazis or during the very oppressive periods, you have a growing culture of art. And I would imagine now after Ukraine, I mean, artists who are against the wall are become much more productive, much more expressive. They have a lot more to say. And the pain of not having the resources, there's no exhibition, no money, nothing, no even the future. It's even more of an impetus to work harder because the audience cares, because the public care, because there's an Iranian people dependent on their artists. Those subversive work of film and literature is what they live for, because that's how they communicate, you see. And the government has become very smart because they notice even the very sort of metaphorical kind of subversive literature. They know they're being critical of that, but still people are doing that. It's really amazing. And I think, to be very honest, in that sense, I work with a lot of boundaries that I give to myself, because I can't work without boundaries. That's because I'm Iranian.
So are there secret galleries? I mean, how is this work being exposed?
There are. One would have to go into it long ways, but there are. I wouldn't say secret, but there are.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much to Shirin Neshat for joining us today for this really fascinating and wonderful discussion, even if it was 25 minutes. And a special thank you to Susan Marx for her generosity in supporting the lecture and the Arthur Ross Gallery. And thank you, our audiences, both in person. It's thrilling to see so many people in person tonight, one of our really first in-person events. And to all of our friends who are on Zoom around the world, thank you for joining us. from the Perry World House next week on Monday, March 21st at 10:30 in the morning. Join Perry World House for the Challenges of the New Space Age, featuring former NASA Administrator Sean O'Keefe and United Nations Undersecretary General and High Representative for Disarmament Affairs, Izumi Nakamitsu. As always, you can access a recording of this conversation both on the Perry World House and Arthur Ross Gallery YouTube channels. And you can find out all about great events we have planned both at the Arthur Ross and at the Perry World House for the rest of the semester by joining the mailing list and following both of our sites on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We'll drop links to all of those in the chat as well. And for those of you joining us in person, please go to the student lounge as you exit. But first, I recommend that you look at the wonderful Ava photograph upstairs by Shirin and get a grab-and-go snack on your way out. Thank you all very, very much for being with us tonight.